Hello, everybody, and welcome in to another episode of the Couch GMs podcast. It is Tuesday, November 8th, 2022. I'm your host, George Kerth, joined by the two best friends anyone could ask for, Tyler Snyder, and back with us, Cody Roadcap. Guys, how we doing? Going into week 10 already.
It's going too quick.
Way too fast.
But I mean, as a Packers fan, I'm getting excited for the draft.
Definitely getting excited for the draft. Look, we're going to try to pick up the energy as the show goes on, but Cody and I did just watch two really tough losses in two different ways. So we're going to try to get through this with some energy, but we're a little depressed right now.
100% get that, but we're going to talk fantasy today, not exactly those game outcomes. So on today's show, we're going to hit some NFL news and notes. We're going to do some quotes of the week. We're going to jump into the week 10 waiver wire, talk some trades with buy low, sell high, and preview the exciting Thursday night matchup between the Atlanta Falcons and Carolina Panthers. Yeah, it's going to be a great one, I'm sure. Make sure you find us on thecouchgms.com.
Hey, don't discredit that. That might be the game of the year so far, their matchup 2 weeks ago. So
that's true.
That's fair.
There might be some fireworks on Thursday night.
We're going to hope for the best, but we can talk about it later. Why don't you find us on thecouchgms.com and our social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at thecouchgms. Join our Discord chat. The link is in the description of the podcast you are watching or listening to. All right, guys, let's jump into NFL news. First up on the news was maybe a little unexpected, but I guess you could have seen it coming. The Indianapolis Colts have decided to fire head coach and I think standing offensive coordinator Frank Reich. And the biggest news on top of it, not only did they fire Frank Reich, they did not promote one of their two former head coaches on their coaching staff to be the interim head coach. They decided to go out there and name Jeff Saturday, former center for the Indianapolis Colts, and high school coach to be their interim head coach. A lot of head-scratching things going on in Indianapolis over the last 2-3 years, and this, I think, just adds right onto that list. Guys, where are you at on it?
So, for me, I think, I'm not saying this is a great move by any means. I'm not, and he doesn't deserve to be a head coaching job because he has no experience. But in a way, I'm going to relate this to when the Mets signed Tim Tebow to the minor leagues. He was never going to make the majors, but he brought people to the stands. He brought people to the games. He helped sell tickets. The Colts, Jonathan Taylor is hurt. They had -2 yards after the first quarter of offense last week. Like, that team is a mess right now. So why not bring in a, guy that's in your ring of honor, face of the franchise, a guy that the city loves to lead the team to kind of help bolster ticket sales the second half of the season. I don't even think he has a legit shot of maintaining the job unless he goes on some magnificent run. But I think this is more of a social play or a marketing play with the head coach, which is very weird, than an actual shot. Could be wrong, but that was my initial thought.
All right. Kind of a hot take here. I think it's absolutely genius of a move. I think it is arguably the best move the Colts have made all year. And not for the reasons Cody said, and not because I think he's about to change the whole face of the franchise and kill it, but because he absolutely should not be the head coach. Get rid of the guy who knows coaching. I would make a strong bet Jonathan Taylor probably not going to play much more the rest of the season. His injury is going to linger and really linger for no reason. I bet you the Colts are tanking. I've seen it before, and you can't physically tank in pro football. You can't just oops, there's the ball. You can't do that. But what you can do is fire your good head coach, promote a center with no coaching experience, and bench your best player. That's what you can do to tank. The Colts need a quarterback. The Colts have finally gotten wise and realized that they can't keep band-aiding the position. Look what the Colts did when they had Peyton Manning for years. They finally get to the end of the Peyton Manning era, and then all of a sudden, the Colts go from one of the winningest teams of the decade to all of a sudden, oh, we're really bad now, making super questionable decisions, become the worst team in the league, and get Andrew Luck in the draft. Now, all of a sudden, the Colts, after being a good team for quite a few years now, always on the cusp of the playoffs, they're oh, now we're suddenly really bad as it's a quarterback-heavy draft coming right up. I think it's a genius move. I think the Colts are finding ways to tank. They'll be able to start over fresh with a rookie quarterback, a new head coach, and they could become dominant real quick. And I think they're going to rest Jonathan Taylor a lot, like I said, to keep him healthy for next year. And if you are in fantasy, my fantasy outlook of this would be trade Jonathan Taylor now. I don't think he's going to play much. I think this injury is going to linger. I think they're going to take it real easy on him. There's no use pushing him in a year where they already lost. If you can still get something good out of the Jonathan Taylor, do it.
So what you're really saying is they're going to hire a head coach that's on his second team and trade for Aaron Rodgers this offseason because that's how the Colts have played the quarterback position.
Probably. Probably.
But yeah, once you started saying that, I was thinking back to how they got Andrew Luck, and yeah, maybe it is that. But something tells me that their owner, Jim Irsay, really thinks that Jeff Saturday is a guy. And I think like he's big on relationships, and that's just something that maybe it is for the fans. Maybe Cody's right too, but I don't think he was thinking 3 steps ahead like Tyler was, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he is. We'll have to wait and find out, I guess. That was the really big piece of news that came out here following the Sunday games, but we did have some injury news as well. And starting off with Buffalo and Josh Allen, who was reported to have an elbow injury to his UCL, which is a ligament in his elbow that normally actually hurts baseball pitchers, but sometimes you'll see NFL players with it as well. They do say he should not miss time, but they need to closely monitor the injury. I am a little bit concerned, I guess. We'll see if he puts a couple weeks between the injury and him and see if he looks okay, but something to keep an eye on.
Definitely worth monitoring. I don't think it's going to hold him back at all. I think this is one of those, like, don't freak out until we hear more. But for right now, I think he's fine.
Yeah, I do wonder, though, and again, we're not going to freak out till we hear more, though, if they do consider shutting him down. They do have the Vikings this week, which is a tough opponent, but then they have the Browns, Lions, Patriots, and then so that would be 4 games that he would miss. I think Case Keenum with that offense and that defense could easily go at least 2-2, if not 3-1. I think that's realistic. So I wonder if they end up shutting him down to give that full time to rest and move forward. Or maybe they don't even put him on IR, but he misses a week or 2. That wouldn't surprise me either.
I just don't know if they would do that now that they just had that loss to the Jets. Like, you doing that now is not just, risking, oh yeah, they're probably still going to be in the playoffs, but they have a chance to lose that division if they go ahead and do that in case Keenum doesn't pan out for those 4 weeks. So I don't know if maybe a rest for a week or 2, but not an IR stint is a possibility. Then they can bring him back sooner if they feel like it's needed. But yeah, maybe there's a chance they rest him.
For sure. But then let's talk some Packers, unfortunately. Not only do they have an ugly loss against the Lions, they had multiple guys leave in crutches and walking boots. One of those was rookie wide receiver Romeo Doubs. He's expected to miss 4 to 6 weeks, so we'll see if he ends up on IR. It sounds like he will. And then Aaron Jones, he did leave the game in a walking boot because his x-rays during the game were inconclusive. So they decided to play it safe and rest him, but they seemed to come back okay. The scans came back okay on Monday. He is a little sore, but they expect him to suit up in week 10. So that is good news for a team that literally has 1 life left if they want to make a playoff run.
It's not
looking good for the Packers, but if there's any saving grace, really, who does look good in the NFL right now? Like, it's
in the NFC specifically. Like,
it's been a really weird year.
Yeah.
So I'm not. This obviously relates to the Packers, but I want to get your guys' thoughts in the NFC. So the Packers are 3-6, and there's 8 games left. I would say they at a minimum they can lose 1 more game and still make the 7 seed with 10 wins. Obviously, I don't think that they're gonna go 7-1 in those last 3 games. I don't see it. But do you think 9 wins makes it? Is this a year where 8 or 8 and 9 might even make it in the NFC, or is there still enough good teams that you pretty much need that 10 win number?
Well,
I got to go check these standings really fast to see.
right now the Packers are 1 game out of a playoff spot.
Yeah.
Like
I'm thinking this could be a year, especially now that we have the extra seed to make 7 go in. 8 and 9 could be good enough for a wild card spot in the playoffs. The only reason it would not is if one of these bad divisions starts muddying things up, like the NFC South with the Bucks, Falcons, Saints all right there, and then one of them makes, say, a 4 seed. It could bump a wild card to have to be a 9-10 win team, but there's not that many good teams in the NFC. The AFC, I think you're going to need 10 wins. The NFC, you might only need 8.
yeah, I mean, if you look at it, like the Seahawks have made the playoffs before at 7-9 and won a playoff game, but
Mhm.
like we've seen it before, and that was with I mean, that's because of a bad division, but we've seen that kind of thing before. Now we have an extra playoff team. Like, there's going to be a bad team that makes the playoffs. It's going to happen. And I'm not even just trying to directly call the Packers a bad team, but right now they are a bad team. But
You
look
can
at
do
it
it.
like
They're a bad team.
the Cowboys have a wild card spot right now, sure. But like the Giants, do we really expect them to keep going? Do we really expect Daniel Jones to continue up the fire that he's been having? The Giants could easily fall off. We got the 49ers. They're 4-4. One week they look great, the next week they look completely lost. You have the Falcons at 4-5 are also battling for a wild card spot. Like, do we really think Atlanta's any good? Washington, like maybe one of these teams like the Rams or Washington can actually start making a push towards that final wild card spot, because you'd think that those would be the teams that do it, but they look like hot garbage too. One trash team has to finally get it to click, turn it on, and they can still make the playoffs. And a team like the Packers right now, there is the rumors that they're looking at Odell Beckham along with the Cowboys and the Bills, and a bunch of other teams are looking at Odell Beckham, but the Packers might be a receiver away from being a decent team. And that right now in the NFC, that's all you need to be to make the playoffs, is decent.
Well,
Yeah.
Packers some big matchups, but we'll have to wait and see. But speaking of one of those poor NFC teams, the 49ers running back Elijah Mitchell was designated to return from IR. From fantasy wise, that's not a big of news now that they have acquired CMC for all those that have him sitting on our IR spots.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're not going to get that epic comeback in the second half of the season like we hoped. Tyler, do you want to add something there?
Yeah, I would just say if you're in a league that has an IR spot, if you're not, fix it. But if you are in a league that has that and you've been stashing Elijah Mitchell this whole time, I wouldn't even worry about trying to figure out which running back or player to drop to activate him. Just drop Elijah Mitchell. I don't think he's worth rostering right now with CMC there. Now, if CMC does go down, Mitchell is a quick pickup. So maybe you want to stash him for handcuff purposes. But, if you have to drop somebody good to activate Mitchell, just drop Mitchell.
Mitchell becomes the new version of Alexander Madison, that the plug and play automatically if this starter gets hurt. But yeah, don't worry about it, especially going through bye weeks. If you can't hold him, don't force it.
I disagree, but I'll talk more about that in a little bit.
All right. Well, that can move us on to our next segment then, my favorite segment, Quotes of the Week. And I think we probably should have hit that Quotes of the Week bumper before we went on our tangent about the Packers and the playoffs, because our first 2 quotes have to do with the Green Bay Packers again, playing yet another bad game. I'll start off with them losing a fan, actually, because Lil Wayne, the rapper, on Twitter came out and said, RIP to the season. We should have got rid of 12 before the season.
Man, Lil Wayne, he helped us with that fantastic, it didn't really work as our fight song for the year, but he made he revamped Green and Yellow. It was great, icon in the stadium. And when you lose Lil Wayne, your season's not doing very well.
100% no. And then there is the Lions side of the ball, who the Lions just beat the Packers. They have a rookie safety named Kirby Joseph, who got 2 interceptions off of Aaron Rodgers this week, and then posted some pictures on Instagram with the caption, "To be honest, I just been farting. Y'all ain't seen poop emoji yet." Solid. That's a quote of the week.
Oh, we did see a number 2 in terms of interceptions. So
yeah.
I mean, legendary post. I don't understand that reference at all. I couldn't believe I was like, that was an actual. I was like, that has to be like a parody account. It wasn't. It was
Nope.
his. Uh, but shout out to him. He made plays when they were available to him. He also had a nice PBU over the middle of the field. So Kirby Joseph deserves to put whatever he wants. He played lights out on Sunday.
And that's the kind of quote that I expect from Jamal Williams, not if it's going to come from that team.
Jamal Williams is rubbing off on people. I kind of like he has those speeches in the locker room. Everyone's like, I want to be like Jamal Williams when I grow up.
And we have one more quote here. At least I'm going to throw in one more here.
Okay.
Mike Vrabel was asked after the game about the sustainability of Derrick Henry taking 26 plus carries every game. And Vrabel said, "We've been able to use Henry, and he has helped us win a lot of games since I've been here. But I don't know what else we should do. What, throw it 50 times? Who the bleep would we throw it to?" Brutally honest quote from Vrabel. Not the kind of thing you normally hear from a head coach, but it's true. The Titans went to overtime against the Kansas City Chiefs, and no wide receiver caught a pass in that game for the Titans. Not a single wide receiver made a reception. It's insane.
I have a tip for Mike Vrabel. He needs to get on a video chat with Andy Reid this week. Because if you remember back, I think it was like 7, 8 years ago, the Chiefs made the playoffs without a wide receiver catching a touchdown pass all season. So, like, if anyone knows how to play a game without a wide receiver, it's Andy Reid. I think that's the connection that needs to happen in this week to
Maybe
game
they just
planning
need a
situations.
connection on balance too, because Patrick Mahomes threw it 68 times in that same game. Maybe they can teach him how to run the ball a little bit more. They can teach him how to throw a little bit more. That's a marriage that needs to happen. And speaking of the wide receivers, you do have to point out, Tyler's going to hate me for bringing it up, but AJ Brown did take to Twitter and just, those guys can't get open with a couple laughing emojis. So he is still throwing some shade at the organization that he feels did not do him right. We will leave the argument on what actually happened for another day. But the last quote, George, since it's your favorite segment, why don't you take it away?
All right, Josh Allen on his loss to the Jets. And I just think this was a very farting type segment. Just kidding. But he said, it's tough to win in this league when your quarterback plays like poop emoji. He actually said the S word on that one. I'm not exactly sure if I can say it or not. I don't remember. But Josh Allen calling himself out in the post-game locker room, that's the kind of accountability you want to see out of your starting quarterback. But we were all in shock when they lost to the Jets this week.
Yeah, but I think, we have to, start taking the Jets seriously a little bit more. I mean, they're playing well. They're playing together. Salah has that team, rolling. And congrats to everyone that bet the over on their 5.5 wins. They were the first team to cash out on season-long bets this week.
Yeah. Huge kudos to Sauce Gardner. The dude is insanely good. Like, he did give up a really big play to Stephon Diggs on the first play of the game. And I was like, oh, wow, Sauce might have finally met his match. But then he locked in for the rest of the game. Like, this dude's good. I'm so excited to watch him for years to come.
I'm just remembering back to the preseason when all these guys are like, Sauce can't have a nickname until he proves himself. He only took like 1 week to be like, yep, okay, he can be called Sauce now. It's good. He is legit.
I think he has his own sauce now at Buffalo Wild Wings, too. So that's pretty cool.
Of course.
That's
Sorry, that's
genius.
your random fact of the day, brought to you by the Couch GMs podcast.
All right,
Buffalo
I'm not even
Wild
gonna
Wings not a sponsor, but they can be. Hit us up.
Yes, they can. We can go hit that button, make the sprinkler come up to make the game go to overtime, like those old commercials with them. All right, guys, let's just jump into some more fantasy and talk Week 10 waiver wire. As always, you can check out my Week 10 waiver wire column on thecouchgms.com. I'm going to go ahead and quick hit some of these guys on the waiver wire. It was an interesting week when it comes to who played, who didn't. I mean, there were 6 teams on bye. Who actually broke out on the waiver wire? It wasn't many people. So I feel like I'm coming back to a lot of these guys for a second and third time because either they should be more owned or they're still just performing and no one cares. So I have 4 running backs on my list. First is Isaiah Pacheco, who is not performing but is still a starting running back. Like, at this point, you have to roster him for future kind of considerations here. The Chiefs aren't gonna throw the ball 60 times a game. Tyler Algier, who still performed even with Cordarrelle Patterson coming back and saw a decent workload too. Jeff Wilson, after the trade to Miami, eaten into carries there in Miami, so he's worth an add again if you did drop him. Chase Edmonds in Denver's kind of my speculative guy because we don't know what Denver's backfield is going to look like. Everyone there is so mediocre at this point. Back to Terrence Marshall at wide receiver because, again, even though Carolina looked bad, he put up another 10-point week. Rondale Moore continues to look good when he's playing in the slot, and he put up another 10-point week as well. And then go ahead, guys. I'm going to let you roast me on the last one. It's Cole Kmet.
It's just your favorite tight end in the league. That's all.
Back-to-back weeks with a touchdown.
Exactly. And now he plays Detroit this week, so streaming tight end, he should be the top of your dartboard.
I mean, Detroit's not the all-time worst defense or like an all-time worst defense. That you can.
They're not the
points on
all-time
them.
worst defense, but I think they're second worst or third worst against the tight end so far this year. It's pretty bad, but it's not all-time worst.
Yeah.
Guys,
Well,
I think the biggest. Oh, go ahead, Cody.
I was gonna say they are on a historically bad pace for defense, which probably looks a lot better now that some team they only allowed 9 points, so that probably took them out of the historical running. But they were on a pace for being historically bad this year.
Good job, Packers. You did something positive this week.
Woo.
So I think the biggest waiver ad to mention, and it might not happen this podcast, you might have to listen to the next podcast, but whoever George bashes, whoever George talks smack about is the number one waiver ad. George talked mad smack on Kyle Pitts only for him to put up his best game of the season. And George multiple times have talked smack on Justin Fields only for him to now be considered a potential top 5 quarterback the rest of the season by many fantasy analysts. That might be reaching a little too far, I don't know, but either way, he has been performing very, very well for fantasy perspectives. So whoever George talks smack about, pick that guy up.
Some of these guys we're mentioning also go check and see if they're available in your league. They're not below 50% owned anymore, so I didn't mention them in the article, but they are guys that should be owned more. So go check them out. But go ahead, Cody.
Yeah, especially a guy like Justin Fields, because I know I picked him up last week, against a decent matchup, but check him out for sure. We do have to talk about Odell Beckham. Jay Glazer put it out on Sunday that, he could be cleared as early as the end of this week, and he'll start taking some calls. He probably still won't be available for a team to be really be involved in the offense till the first week of December. So we're looking right around the time for playoffs are. But so if you're on the brink of the playoffs or you're a playoff team, go ahead and start picking up Odell Beckham Jr. now as kind of like a stash play, especially if he goes to the team like the Buffalo Bills, who he's in the mix with, Dallas, opposite of CeeDee Lamb. I know he's in the mix to go back to LA. That's probably not as, great of a destination, but we saw him and Cooper Kupp put up decent amount of points last year. So Odell Beckham is definitely a name to watch.
Yeah, I kind of disagree on the picking up Odell Beckham unless you're in a situation where you're like number 1, number 2 in your league and you have that open spot. Like if you're at the spot where you're like, I know I'm making the playoffs, I just want to be good for the fantasy playoffs, then go ahead, pick up Odell Beckham, stash him. But if you're in like that 8th, 7th, 6th spot, even if you're like 4th or 5th and you're like, your team's a little sketchy right now, going up and down, like injuries are kind of crazy. Bye weeks are kind of crazy. I would rather stash somebody that I can play now to make sure I even make the playoffs instead of stashing a playoff asset. But like I said, if you're in a situation where you are highly expecting to make the playoffs, then he's not a bad stash.
Yeah, exactly. You have to go ahead. Sorry, Cody.
No, you're good. I just haven't been here for a while, so I just feel like talking a lot, I guess. My bad.
That's
but
fine.
the Odell Beckham thing, I think that's a great point. It's also true that just the waiver wires are so bad this week.
Yeah.
Like a guy like Terrence Marshall, all right, he's had, a couple of decent good games, but he's on that borderline of okay, I'll pick him up, but do I ever feel confident starting him? Would I ever start him, or would I be looking elsewhere? So if you're gonna hold a guy like that who you don't even feel confident playing, but you're just picking him up because that's what everybody else says they would do, go ahead and pick up Odell Beckham. Now, if you need a guy, obviously you're gonna have to, wait later to get Odell Beckham. Hopefully somebody, or maybe he gets dropped. He could be a guy that gets picked up now and then injuries cause him to be dropped later. So a name to keep an eye out on. So definitely depends on who's available and what your team looks like.
Yeah, and I got 2 more people for you here, George. I know you got one more for us. But I want to throw two more out there. First, tight ends have been really rough this year, but there's a tight end that should be back next week, and he has been pretty solid, averaging about 9 points per game, and that's David Njoku. He is 57% owned, but if he was dropped anywhere because of his injuries, he's not a bad tight end to pick up and start playing. The other one is, and call me the homer, maybe, but Traylon Burks, rookie wide receiver for the Titans. Look, the Titans don't have a receiver doing anything. Traylon Burks really started to flash before he got injured. Burks is expected to return next week. Same with Ryan Tannehill. They did have a connection before the injury, and look, the Titans need to throw to somebody. So he's not a bad pickup and stash to see if he can finally break out too, because I don't expect any NFL team to ever really continue on a only 5 completions a game kind of rate. Like at some point, the passing game's going to open up, and he's going to be the number one wide receiver. Anytime there's a number one wide receiver on free agency, I like to go after him.
And
Exactly. Like what we're looking for here is opportunity. And like you said, they're not going to continue with five receptions a game, especially once Ryan Tannehill comes back. Yeah, they're still not going to pass the ball more than most teams out there, but they're not going to go there and be an Atlanta Falcons when they were throwing 15 passes a game. So we were always like trying to target who's going to get traded to the Packers, who's going to get traded to the Titans, who's going to get traded to the Ravens, because we're trying to find number one wide receivers. This falls right into that same philosophy with they had it in-house, but he was just injured. And like the same thing for the waiver rush we had last week for Romeo Doubs after Rodgers started to connect with him and we thought he was going to be the guy to separate.
Yeah, and just to clarify, you did say next week, but that is this coming week, right? Like we expect Tannehill and Burke
to be the next game.
Yes. Just wanted to make sure everyone's out there. So I do like the Traylon Burks ad. And then also, this also depends on your team, where you're at right now. But look at the teams that are on bye. So for this week, you have the Bengals, you have the Patriots, I believe, the Jets, the Ravens. They're all on bye this week. But the Ravens, they get to play the Panthers, and the Bengals get to play the Steelers. Those are two defenses that you can pick up this week or even pick up later after you pick up one of these guys. I don't do good, drop them and pick them up before the waiver wires next week. So I know when we think about bye weeks, a lot of times we're thinking about, all right, how am I going to get through the bye weeks? But, look who's on bye this week and what their matchup might be available next week and a guy you could pick up before the waiver rush, because there's not a clear-cut home run, go get him guy on the waivers this week. So you can look ahead a little bit this week. You can try to, figure out what you might need in the upcoming weeks on how your buys play out and attack the waiver wire a little bit differently than you have to start the season.
Definitely agree with you there. And then my last team, I guess, on here, we always try to give you a streaming defense for this week, as much as it is smart to go out and try to look 2-3 weeks ahead for that. The Tennessee Titans would be my team for this week. They are playing against, Tyler, you can help me if
the Broncos.
You see it first. I lost
Broncos.
It. The Broncos.
And then they have the
Broncos
Packers
are an
after
absolute
that.
mess. And then the Packers after that, if the Packers keep going too, that could be a 2-for-1 kind of deal there with the Titans. They're 25% owned in NFL.com leagues, so pretty widely available. They're the team I would go out to, especially after they just dropped 10 points on defense against the Chiefs, who give up an average of 3. So they're overperforming right now and then going to 2 good matchups. I like it.
Yeah, the Titans defense is performing very well. It's really surprising because they're missing like all of their pass rushers and all of their top corners, except Christian Fulton. But
you're making it sound very tempting for these guys out here to pick them up.
But they should be seeing some defensive players coming back from injury this week as well. Hoping to get back Elijah Molden, hoping to get back Amani Hooker, hoping to get back Caleb Farley. So lots of big pieces returning to the Titans defense after they're already performing as one of the best. I think it's a great streaming defense.
I agree.
All right, if we have
so it's not just
no one else. If we have no one else here to add, why don't we talk some trades, which may be interesting this week. Let's go some buy low, sell high. Yes, let's talk a little bit of trade with buy low, sell high. So go check your league settings first off and see when your league's trade deadline is. I know for our leagues, we always make it as late as possible, so we still have about 3 more weeks worth of trading to go. But some leagues' trade deadlines may be as early as this Friday. So this is the time to go out there and try to set yourself up for your stretch run and your fantasy playoffs. And that makes this buy low sell high segment even more important than maybe even the rest we've done. Tyler, no pressure. Start it off here. Buy low candidate for the week.
Yeah. I just want to reiterate, sell Jonathan Taylor. But my buy low candidate for the week is Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson's a weird one to say because, I mean, look, he really hasn't been performing that well, and the Steelers really aren't that impressive. He is currently 7th in most targeted players. 7th. He was on bye. Like, the dude is, he's getting targets. He's getting thrown to, and anytime you have a guy that is getting potential volume, it makes for a good fantasy player. I'm not saying Deontay Johnson's going to step into your team and right away be like wide receiver 1, but he could be a solid flex down the stretch, especially if he's going to continue to see that kind of volume. So go get a guy who's not scoring a ton but is getting the targets. Deontay Johnson.
All right, and I'll stick with the wide receivers here. This guy is probably a little bit harder to get than a Deontay Johnson, so I don't know. He might not be an exact buy low, but he is coming off of a bye this week, so people might have forgot about it. But that is Browns wide receiver Amari Cooper. He is actually currently wide receiver 8 in fantasy half point PPR, but he plays for the Browns. It's Jacoby Brissett. He's not like, putting up huge number. He's been fairly consistent, but he hasn't had a bunch of like incredibly boom weeks or anything like that. So he's a guy that is probably movable. And we're 2 weeks away from the return of Deshaun Watson, which should see an uptick in the passing attempts. So Amari Cooper, he might be a guy you might want to try to swing for at the trade deadline because he's already putting up decent fantasy points. I mean, top wide receiver fantasy points with Jacoby Brissett. You expect the passing game to have an uptick with Deshaun Watson. So I think Amari Cooper, if you can get him for the right price, I'd go out and try to get him.
I like that a lot. And yeah, especially reiterating the Deshaun Watson coming back should make him even better. And he's been solid already. I have one at the running back position here to talk about in our buy low. And it might cost you still a lot, but you probably have a lot of fantasy owners of him that are super frustrated. DeAndre Swift. So we all know Swift is still dealing with injuries. He's going to probably be frustrating for the next 2-3 weeks as he keeps being limited, keeps slowly working back. Jamal Williams keeps getting a majority of the carries and stealing touchdowns, go figure. But we know when he's healthy, the Lions offense runs through DeAndre Swift. And it's not going to be this way the entire season. Maybe the touchdowns will get stolen here or there. That's probably going to be an inevitable. But he's still got first-round pick ceiling. And you can probably get him for a 3rd or 4th round pick value right now with people that are super frustrated and worried about Jamal Williams.
All right, Snyder, I'm going to ask you real quick about DeAndre Swift right here because you are in our league of record the DeAndre Swift owner. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct.
And I know that you have been frustrated with him. So what are some running backs that you might consider trading 1 for 1, or maybe a guy and a receiver? I know I'm throwing you on the spot here. Probably haven't thought too much about it, but
I mean, after this week, please give me Mixon. Like anybody out there that's willing to give me Mixon, I'll take. But no, DeAndre Swift,
like,
man, it's tough because like he has been so frustrating. I am afraid of him being able to stay healthy, which is what turns my value down. Knowing what he can do when he is healthy is what keeps my value up. Some people I would consider probably maybe a Miles Sanders. I mean, he's very inconsistent, but at least like he's gonna get the ball. Maybe a Dameon Pierce, another running back that's like on a bad team, but he's gonna get the volume. If someone's willing to give you Kenneth Walker, I would take him all day for DeAndre Swift because Walker's been absolutely phenomenal. That's about where I would value him. Me personally, I'm probably going to hold tight to him because I'm a DeAndre Swift truther. I have him in too many leagues because I like him too much. But yeah, that's about where I'd value him.
So just go out there and kind of test the waters with your DeAndre Swift owner. Maybe they're not somebody who is as ingrained in the league as us, and they would not see his value as high as someone like a Tyler would. And then, yeah, maybe you can get him even more of a discount. But you're still going to have to pay up. He's still a first round draft pick, but he's struggling. So this is the lowest you're going to get him at.
Yeah, and I do think, though, you do have to remember, though, he was a first round draft pick. So if you're an owner out there with DeAndre Swift, you have to let go that he was your first round draft pick. Just like you're not getting much for Jonathan Taylor at this point. You're not getting much for I cannot think of the guy I was about to say. So, but like just because that you were drafted, we're 10 weeks removed or more from when we drafted. So yes, he has value, but don't think about, oh, I drafted this guy in the third, you drafted him in the second. Like, no one's trading Saquon Barkley, who was drafted in the third round, for Jonathan Taylor right now, who is the number one, number two overall pick. So keep the values in mind, but it's okay to let go of those values and just go based on how we're scoring. We've seen enough data at this point to the draft value isn't as important as it was, weeks 4, 5, and 6.
100%. And then that can move us into players you should be selling high. And Tyler, why don't you start us off your sell high candidate of the week?
Yeah, so my sell high is hard for me to say because he's a guy that I was trying to buy low in drafts. And I thought he was a steal if you can get him where his value was. And now I'm telling you to sell high on him. But look, one of the biggest things I say about running backs and receivers benefit from bad teams because you fall behind early. You want to throw the ball late. They get those garbage time points. Running backs benefit from good teams. You want to run out the clock in the second half. There is a running back that is overperforming on a team that is absolute garbage this year, and that is Josh Jacobs. He is running back 6 coming into this past week. Right now, he is had to do quick counting 7, running back 7. He's right up there with Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, all those guys performing on that same level. But he is on a really bad team. I don't expect those kinds of points to continue. If you can trade Josh Jacobs and get a solid receiver or a solid running back that you trust a little bit more, or maybe you're somebody that's struggling with injuries and could use some depth, trade Josh Jacobs, get a startable running back and a receiver with it. I would probably try to move him.
I'm going to play devil's advocate just a little bit on you here. Like, he does have a very easy looking schedule coming up. He's got Indianapolis, Denver, Seattle, LA Chargers in the next 4 weeks. And then his fantasy playoff schedule does get a little harder. I guess LA Rams isn't that bad. New England's tough. Pittsburgh, but San Francisco's tough. So maybe you do try to sell him now, but even yet, he's coming off of a couple of sketchy weeks. The people might be worried about that offense. I don't know what kind of value you can get, but he might perform well in the next week or two, and then that value goes up even more. So maybe holding him another week. I don't know. Just kind of see where you think you want to get for him and what people are offering you.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I do think Josh Jacobs, his points are kind of inflated off of 3 huge weeks this season. So I feel like that's another reason why you can sell him. He was getting over 20 carries per game in the earlier part of the season. In his last 2 weeks, he got 17 and 10. So his carries have dipped a little bit. And I have a bad feeling that if the Raiders, already they could start turning to some backups, but you have a rookie running back that you want to see what he can do. You have some more players on the team that you want to see what they can do. You already know what you got out of Josh Jacobs, and you might not even be keeping Josh Jacobs beyond this year by everything that we've seen. So I don't see the reason the Raiders, if they're going to keep losing, if they're already out of the playoffs, why they would keep forcing Josh Jacobs and not just start seeing what they got out of some of their other guys. So that's another reason why I'm trying to move on from Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, makes sense.
George, why don't you go?
Okay. All right. So I'm going to go to the New York Jets, sticking at the running back position, though, and I'm going to sell high on Michael Carter. And I have no doubts that if Michael Carter was the number one for that job and they didn't go out there and trade for James Robinson, he would have been great down the stretch. He would have been a great guy for you to target, fill in your running back 2 spot, and he'd be a starter most weeks. But, like I said, James Robinson is there. Robinson, his first week was, not really into the playbook yet. He was limited for that. This week, he was added to the injury report on Saturday, so limited in that way. Michael Carter's timer is still ticking, and there's going to be a point where, at the least, that ends up being a 50-50 split, in my opinion. So I'm worried about when that comes and it's too late to sell Michael Carter. And again, he is someone who just sits on your bench or you drop because you're not going to start him because he ends up being your running back 5. So I'm trying to get value out of him now.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a solid option. So I do like that one as well. So I'm gonna shake it up. I'm gonna drop a big name out here, and don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying this is a guy you must trade, but we talked about it a little bit when we mentioned that Elijah Mitchell is coming back from the IR, and they did go out. They gave up a lot of picks to get Christian McCaffrey, so we still expect Christian McCaffrey to be the head honcho, the lead horse in that backfield. But he's coming off a bye week. But the game before that, he threw one, he caught one, he passed, or he ran one. He did all three. Like, they want to use him. That does concern me with injury, but I don't like to, you can't bet on injury, so you shouldn't play fantasy that way. But what you can bet on is Kyle Shanahan will shake it up. And if Elijah Mitchell gets hot, Elijah Mitchell will be the starter for that week. It could get frustrating with Christian McCaffrey. So if you can go out and get, an AJ Brown and a Damian Pierce for Christian McCaffrey, or you can get a Travis Etienne and a Devontae Adams, if you can get a solid 2-for-1 for Christian McCaffrey after his huge breakout game in San Francisco, I think the value is there to do it, to set you up for the playoffs. So I'm not going out there to trade Christian McCaffrey just to do it, but if I can get 2 solid options, the guy does have an injury history. They're bringing back the guy that led the team in rushing last year. Like, there could be a little, step back in how many opportunities to get, because they'll probably want to get Mitchell at least on the field a little bit. So you're not going to probably play Mitchell as long as CMC is there and healthy, but he will eat into the snaps a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that's, Cody, you bring up a good point, and I think that's one of the biggest pieces of advice that we can give to the people out there is I don't think you should ever have anybody on your team that's untouchable. I don't think untouchable should be a word. There could be people that are next to impossible to get. I mean, take for example, say you have Cooper Kupp. I mean, this is one of the best receivers in the league. He's so consistent. Why would you ever want to trade Cooper Kupp? Okay, what happens when somebody offers you Justin Jefferson and Travis Etienne for Cooper Kupp?
Mhm.
Is he still untouchable? Because I'm probably taking that deal. I feel like the value you get back is worth it. So I feel like nobody should ever be untouchable. Christian McCaffrey is one of those guys as well. Right now, with the way he's playing, you might be like, there's no reason I should ever move him. But hey, you don't know what kinds of deals could be out there. Like Cody said, don't be actively shopping him, but don't be afraid to listen to some offers if somebody does come to you.
100% true. And if you have any questions on offers that you're sending, you're receiving, please send it to us on our messages, comment on this video or podcast. We are always here to give you trade advice and add drop advice, anything you need to help your team. We have one more segment before we get out of here. Why don't we jump into a little Thursday night football preview? Thursday Night Football takes us to Carolina, where the Carolina Panthers are hosting the Atlanta Falcons for a divisional game that Cody said earlier was one of the games of the year when they met the first time. So maybe I am wrong by saying this is going to be a snooze fest, but it is a Thursday night, so who really knows what kind of product we're going to get on the field.
Hey, the Texans gave the Eagles a run for their money for 3 quarters. So
They did.
Thursday night is weird. It's in Carolina, so I think that would give them the slight edge. They are starting PJ Walker again. If he struggles like he did last week, I think they're going to make the switch during the 10-day break back to either Baker or Sam Darnold, who they activated last week. PJ Walker gets another start, and there's not a lot of great options. Like, this isn't a matchup that you're excited about if you're not a fan of them, because there's not a lot of fantasy options out there. On the Panthers side, you'll probably still play DJ Moore at this point, and hope that he keeps his helmet on if he catches a game-winning touchdown. And maybe
Dante Foreman,
I
probably
was gonna
still.
maybe Dante Foreman if Chuba's still out. and because running backs are, hard to come by. But outside of that, like I know Terrence Marshall was a waiver wire pickup we talked about earlier in the show. I'm still not completely sold on him being in your lineup this week. At least it is a somewhat positive matchup if you are in desperate need or have a lot of teams on bye, similar to how our matchup in League of Record for week 9, I got to play Snyder with, was it 6 or 7 of your people on bye?
I think 7.
Yeah. Wasn't great.
No,
I tried,
definitely
man.
was
I
not.
tried. But look, I think I kind of agree with Cody. If you're listening earlier in the season, he mentioned something about Thursday Night Football, and of course, you were listening early in the season. I know you all out there listen to every single episode. We thank you for that. Um, but Cody mentioned how Thursday Night Football, there's just something about it that the points seem to be weird. It always almost seems like an underwhelming fantasy day. Sometimes you have those guys that break out and put up 40 points on a Thursday Night Football game, and it's great. But like Cody mentioned, that he doesn't want to start somebody who's kind of in the middle and have them put up a dud game, and then you got to sit there for days looking at that terrible score, waiting for Sunday to roll around. And I know it's a weird way to play fantasy, but I kind of agree with him. So if you're on the fence with some guys in this matchup, I'd rather just play somebody else and wait for Sunday. The regret of having them on your bench when they did pretty well isn't as uh, potent as the regret of starting someone who sucked. So I would probably try to lean away from DJ Moore and Dante Foreman. It kind of depends on who else you have, but if you can lean away from him as well, go for it. On the Falcons side of the ball, George, who do you got?
Cordarrelle Patterson, maybe,
Yeah.
probably. If you're absolutely desperate with injuries or bye weeks, you could consider Algier because he's also basically in a 50-50 split with Patterson right now. But that's another one like a DJ Moore that I'm trying to avoid if all possible. I'd rather play Foreman than Algier, but that's how it is. And then I actually want to test Cody. I want to see how close to the tight end dartboard Kyle Pitts is at this point. You don't like playing dartboard tight ends on a Thursday. Would you play Pitts?
Yeah. I know Pitch has sucked like majority of the season, and I understand that. But we have seen he has the potential to put up points, and he's starting to come around. He's had some good games the last couple weeks. Like this is not a knock on Dawson Knox at all. He's a great player. Like he doesn't have the same upside as Kyle Pitts, despite being on a significantly better offense. He just doesn't. Like Cole Kmet, Georgia's guy. He's got a touchdown back-to-back weeks. Doesn't have the same upside as a guy like Kyle Pitts. So in terms of tight ends, like I would still play Kyle Pitts. He's still like pretty much an every week starter for me because he's just such a freak athlete at the position. Hopefully, it continues to look more like the last couple weeks than it did the first half of the season. So for me, Pitts is still in my lineup.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything else to add on Falcons Panthers as much as it's a positive matchup for both sides. I think it's just kind of you want to stay away because the offenses are a little sketchy.
So if I just had it up, I should look again just to confirm. But bye week wise, Lamar Jackson's on bye, Joe Burrow's on bye. Any interest in Marcus Mariota on Thursday Night Football with the rushing ability?
Mariota just had a very enticing matchup this week, and I thought it was the time to throw him in there and shine, and he kind of underperformed. I feel like there's other quarterback options out there that you could probably start, but if you're struggling, if you're in one of those situations where, you don't have a good quarterback and it's like Jared Goff or Mariota or like, then yeah, go for it, because I'd rather have the potential rushing ability than, just hoping for a dart board quarterback. But in all honesty, I'm trying to avoid Mariota because he does have the legs. The issue is they don't really let him throw a whole lot. And even if they did, outside of Kyle Pitts and Drake London, he really doesn't have much to throw to anyway. So I'd probably try to avoid him if you can.
Man, I was waiting for you to start going to my league team and just reading down my roster. Like, unless you have Jared Goff or Tom Brady or Jimmy Garoppolo, like I've been struggling so bad at that position in that league. It's been bad.
Quarterbacks are bad. Football is bad. Like, there's a lot of bad teams right now.
Yeah, and I think they said it on was it last Sunday night? I think last night we were watching the game. How touchdowns are down, passing touchdowns are down, yardage is down. Like we're just kind of in like a slower football time. It's not the it's crazy as it sounds. I'm going to bring it back to Aaron Rodgers. He had his highest passing yards of the season on Sunday, putting up 9 points at 291 yards. We're at week 10, and Aaron Rodgers still doesn't have a 300-yard game.
That's crazy.
Absolutely insane.
You know what else is
Mario's
insane?
a top 10 fantasy quarterback right now. Like,
absolutely insane.
It's insane.
The Packers only have 20 less yards than the Eagles this year. Okay, I'm done talking about the Packers. Like, I can't. Yes,
that's fake.
That's 100% real. Granted, the Eagles did have a bye week, so it's a little skewed.
It's still fake.
The Packers only have 20 less yards than the Philadelphia Eagles this year. Okay, the people are like, this is a fantasy podcast, not a Packers podcast. But I've been gone for 2 weeks. I needed an event, and this Thursday night matchup is not great. So I appreciate you guys letting me clear that out. But I think it's time to wrap up the show and thank the people for listening.
Yeah, guys, and I know what you're thinking. I know exactly what you're thinking. Thank God Cody's back. Now, when does George leave? But that's not happening
Monday.
yet.
Next Monday, I'll be off for an episode. So,
but that's one episode. Everyone's hoping for you to be gone for a long period of time, but it's not going to happen. You're stuck with George. But what you can do is continue to roast him, roast some of his picks, some of his insights here. That's what we love to do as Couch GM. So we'd love for you to join in. In all honesty, we just want to hear from you. We want to hear what did you like about the podcast? What would you like us to change? What players do you think we should have added to our waiver wire pickup? Give us some, who should I start? Some, should I make this trades? It is crunch time for the fantasy playoffs. They are not far away. Let us help you make the playoffs. Either way, this podcast is way more fun for us and more fun for you when you get to them.
Yes, it is, Tyler, and thank you all one more time for listening into the Couch GMs podcast. For Cody Roadcap and Tyler Snyder, I'm George Kerth, and we'll see you all later this week.